Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We say Jazakallah. Thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. Now, the mining affected communities United in Action says it is mulling legal action against the government for what it calls the inhumane treatment of illegal miners in Stilfontein in the northwest. The move comes after law enforcement intensified Operation Phyllia Ngoatje, meant to address rampant crime in areas linked to illicit mining at the abandoned shaft. Joining us now, I'd like to welcome the MACAU-MAWUA head of Paralegal Unit Advice Office, and joining us via Zoom, it's Phyllia Ngoatje. Phyllia, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Phyllia, I need to ask this question. Where does one draw the line between obviously the humane treatment that, of course, you taking this a case to, and the fact that what these miners were doing constitutes, from a mining perspective, the illegality of where they are? Could you talk to us about that, please?
The fact of the matter is that these are abandoned mines that are not rehabilitated. And the fact of the matter is that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy has left the sector unregulated for years and years. They have actually left the sector to not rehabilitate mines, and poverty has left us in a situation whereby we have miners, ex-miners, to fend for themselves, trying to put food on the table. And they have now left themselves in a position whereby they need to fend for themselves, right? And it's unspeakable that we have to criminalize poverty in these ways.
Phyllia, let's touch on the area northwest. One needs to only look at Marikana, what has happened there 12 years on. When you speak to the communities of that part of the northwest, they keep talking about the fact that, you know, there still seems to be no real progression in its community in terms of the basic needs within the constitution. Is this a classic case of that, from government's perspective, there clearly is no real goodwill in terms of rehabilitating these mines, number one, but number two, the mining conglomerates, the likes of Goldfields, Sibanye, Stillwater, and the others that operate in that area, seem to not want to put any supposed investment into these abandoned mines, which could ultimately lead to these illegal miners becoming what we would term legal.
That is very true in a lot of circumstances, whereby we have a situation whereby, one, they are mining companies, which are legal miners, for lack of a better term, that are not putting investments into communities, right? And we also have a situation whereby they're not rehabilitating once they're done mining. And we also have community members who need to make a living after mining is done. And if the sector is not regulated properly by mining companies, by the department of, we find ourselves in a situation whereby we have a community that is left ungoverned and left to fend for itself. And if we are not regulating the sector, as we have a situation now, we then find ourselves in a situation whereby we find the communities desolate.
Phyllia, talk to us about this legal action that's obviously that your organization is looking to launch against government. I'm sure it goes beyond the words that were said by Minister in the Presidency, Kumbutso Ntshavheni, last week when she said, quote unquote, smoke them out. I want to touch on what are some of the arguments that your organization is going to bring with regards to this.
Right now, It is something we're thinking about. There are various human rights abuses that are happening at present, right? Um, the government has taken a position whereby it has purposefully and intentionally so taken a position whereby it is starving human beings, right? Denying them a right to dignity, denying them a right to life, denying them a right to food and water. And we are of the position that you cannot block and trap people in a pit and deny them essential services and then arrest them on their way out, right? And it creates a very hostile environment, one. And number two, it also creates an environment whereby we are criminalizing poor people once again, right? And we are talking to our partners right now around the effect that this will have, especially given the fact that there are a lot of weak people, a lot of people who are experiencing trauma to their bodies. This could result in a lot of deaths. And if that is the case, we will definitely take this to court. But we are monitoring the situation very closely and talking with our various partners in civil society with the position that with the human rights abuses that are happening right now, we do have a view that we could potentially take this definitely to court.
Phyllia, you touched on human rights abuses. Now, where I stay within the East Rand, 5 minutes from me, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to narrate the story to you, and I'm going to take 1 minute of your time with regards to this. What happens is, during the evenings, because there are, of course, illegal miners that operate in various abandoned mines, and I beg your pardon, I'll agree with you that these are abandoned mines that are supposed to be taken care, number one, by government, and number two, by various mining firms. There are shootouts between illegal miners and the South African Police Service. And taking from the South African Police Service side, they will say, well, we put our lives at risk trying to take down these miners who are, of course, affecting the communities right over there. So where does, of course, the Mining Affected Communities United in Action come into this? Of course, we're not saying all the miners are doing this. There could be 1 or 2 or 3 out of 10 that are going ahead and saying they do not want to abide by the law. So how does your organization say, let us try and split between the two, those miners who actually want work, that want to work in a legal means, and those miners who are actually acting as criminal entities?
Thank you for that. And I think we should really separate the two issues, right? We need to separate artisanal miners from criminal syndicates, because the fact that the sector is unregulated allows for criminal syndicates to exist and actually thrive in the sector, the same way that unregulated other industries have allowed criminal syndicates to thrive. In the examples of criminal syndicates in construction have been allowed to thrive in other sectors, like also with the ESCOM sagas, etc. Now, when we don't regulate a sector like mining and artisanal mining, we allow for criminal syndicates to take over the space and also thrive criminally so. So we need to regulate the sector in order to allow those who want to, legalize the sector to actually operate legally so, and so that we can stop the criminal elements from thriving in the sector.
Phyllia, one final question. The buck, of course, stops with government. It stops with the Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum Energies, that's Phyllia Ngoatje. There's been tons of criticism, of course, forwarded towards him, the fact that he's been standing still, not doing anything. And this has been a persistent problem. It's been a problem that has existed not now in the last year, but it's been 2, 3, even 4 years. Is he the sort of minister that your organization, other stakeholders can really sit down on the table and ask him the very simple question, when are you going to regulate mining so that these artisanal miners can go ahead and earn, number one, a legal salary, but also number two, they can contribute to their communities who are at this very moment still suffering from poverty.
So we have recently, in our march on the 14th of November, submitted to the Department of Mineral Resources and, no, the DMPR
Yes.
now, a memorandum, and it includes our submissions for the amendment of the MPRDA. And in it we have included our submissions for the regulation of artisanal miners as well. And we want it legislated in the MPRDA, the regulation of the artisanal mining sector, because if it's not legislated in the MPRDA, it becomes very difficult for it to become law, right? So we are of the view that it needs to form part and parcel of the MPRDA, because that's how it actually holds everybody to account.
Phyllia, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Phyllia Ngoatje. She is the Paralegal Unit Advice Office for the Mining Affected Communities United in Action. This story, again, like I mentioned last week, it's not going to end anytime soon. There's still so much, not just from talking of the artisanal miners section, but also what role does government have to play with regards to this? Well, what role does government have to play? Well, they've said, spaza shops, you've got 21 days to register. Is that enough time? I'm going to be speaking to Michael Ramatopu, who, of course, is the Deputy President of the South African Spaza and Tuck Shop Association. Do stay tuned.